hear the waves, right? That steady, patient sound, like a clock that never forgets. I'm sitting where the land ends and the sea begins. Tonight the moon is a sliver, and the horizon is just a darker band. I have a small fire at my feet, a cup of coffee cooling, and a story I don't like to tell when the sun is up. It's not a ghost story about things that vanish from walls or shadows that move on their own. It's smaller and somehow sharper, about a single light, a small decision, and how the sea keeps records of the moments people think are only theirs. Listen close. This is the kind of story that looks harmless in daylight and terrible at night. A few years back, I won't say where, because some places prefer to forget, there was a fisherman named Omar. He wasn't the sort to talk much. He had hands that looked like maps of storms. He'd come ashore at dusk, sell his catch at the corner by the cafe, fix nets, sleep, and go again. He loved the sea in the way that leaves you with salt in your pockets, even on dry days. One night in late autumn, a gale had passed through, and the harbor was messy with uprooted buoys and floating crates. The town lights were the usual postcard blur, but out near the shipping lane, someone or something was moving a small pale light. Not a ship's lantern, something lower and bobbing. Omar was at the pier, drying a net, when he saw it. A dim light drifting slower than the tide. People assumed it was a fisherman's lamp, maybe someone stranded. Word got around. Somebody might be out there. Calls were made. A volunteer launcher prepared. But the official rescue boat had been called out earlier in the evening. They were tied up until dawn. Omar didn't want to wait for someone else. He stepped into his skiff. He told his sister, "I'll take a look." He took a coil of rope, a small lantern, and that stubborn patience fishermen have. The town watched him push off. The light didn't flee. It kept its place like a metronome on the water. Omar was at the pier, drying a net, when he saw it. A dim light drifting slower than the tide. People assumed it was a fisherman's lamp, maybe someone stranded. Word got around. Somebody might be out there. Calls were made. A volunteer launcher prepared. But the official rescue boat had been called out earlier in the evening. They were tied up until dawn. Omar didn't want to wait for someone else. He stepped into his skiff. He told his sister, "I'll take a look." He took a coil of rope, a small lantern, and that stubborn patience fishermen have. The town watched him push off. The light didn't flee. It kept its place like a metronome on the water. The box rolled under his hand. The light winked, once, right under the water, like an eye. Omar jerked back. The sea made a small hard sound, like a closing lid. For a heartbeat he saw reflections, not of the town or the moon, but of faces pressed against glass, mouths open, mouths that looked like windows to rooms under the waves. He told himself he was tired, that it was the lantern trembling. He hauled the box into the skiff. When he pried the lid, not with heroics, just a slow, stubborn motion, there was only dense, black kelp and a tangle of seaweed that smelled like old promises. Yet wrapped inside that kelp was a child's shoe. A tiny, weather-worn shoe with a faded cartoon stitched on the side. The light was tied to it, and tied to a strip of cloth that stank of cheap perfume and old seawater. Omar felt chilled in a way salt couldn't fix. He tied the box down and turned for shore. The skiff was heavier. He rowed, and the tide pushed as if it were trying to keep something. When he reached the pier, the town had a different look. People wide-eyed, neighbors speaking quicker. Someone had called the police now. Someone else had called the Coast Guard. The lighthouse blinked in its slow, mechanical patience. They checked the boat and the box. Forensics later would say it was nothing but debris, maybe trash from a ship, the kind of grim flotsam that tells 100 small stories. The shoe was cataloged, photographed, bagged. No missing person reports matched it for months, then years. But Omar stopped going out at night after that. He sold fish in the morning and drank tea at the market, but he refused to take a lantern back to the pier once dusk came. He'd shake his head when friends asked, say, "There's a way the sea keeps something for itself. Don't ask it to hand it over." 2 weeks later, a boy, maybe 9, came into the market asking for his father. He said the father had gone fishing and never came back. His voice was small. His father's name matched a name that had been on the police file. The town organized a search. People lit torches. The Coast Guard trawled the lanes. Eventually, they found nothing but the same scattered debris and a shell of a boat. The boy's mother would sometimes walk to the pier at night and stand very still, like a statue looking for a face that couldn't be seen. Omar would keep his distance. He couldn't explain why exactly, but he had a memory of light under the water and faces like glass. He felt guilty for touching that floating thing. Guilty that his curiosity had moved something he couldn't control. The thing you have to understand about the sea is this. It keeps, not always bodies. Sometimes it keeps moments. It keeps the last breath of a fisherman in the bubbles that climb the hull. The last argument someone's lips were about to finish. The sound of a laugh that disappears into wave sound. And sometimes, buried in the kelp or strapped to a stray crate, it offers a small proof. A shoe, a photograph gone soft, an old lighter that still flicks with a tired spark. When people find those things, they think they have answers. They think the sea is finally giving one back. But most of the time, the sea is only returning a piece of someone else's story, enough to make a wound tender, not healed. So when you see a light in the water at night, a little bobbing glow, remember this. Some lights are SOS, and some are echoes, and some are invitations. The sea can answer, but it will answer on its own terms. Keep your fire close, keep your coffee hot, and if a light floats by, let it float. Some things belong to the dark,